Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, King, Colcourse, La Mantilla, Menendez, Middleton, Miles, Nichols, Parker, Paxton, Perry, Schwartner, Sparks, Springer, West, Whitmire, Zaffarini.
Members, we have a quorum present. I'm going to hold for a few moments before the invocation because some of our members are coming from committee to let them arrive. Welcome everyone in the gallery. Good to have you with us today visiting, all the students as well. Members, if you can take your seats, please. Members, now you're at your desk. Please rise, and everyone in the gallery, please rise. And Senator Betancourt, I will acknowledge you after the invocation. His Eminence, Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, to do our invocation. Good to have you with us, Cardinal.
Thank you. Let us pray. O God of justice and mercy, as we gather in service to our state, we give you thanks for the gift of life and for the opportunity to serve you and one another. We pray for all the members of the legislature, for judges, elected civil officials, and all others who are entrusted to guard our political welfare. May they be enabled by your powerful protection to discharge their duties with honesty and ability. We pray for the humility to better listen to you and to one another, seeking to hear and not just be heard, to act boldly in the pursuit of justice and integrity, and to promote and protect the fullness of human dignity. May we all be stirred to a more generous and dedicated service towards the common good of our community. We pray to you, to our Lord and God, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Cardinal. Senator Betancourt, did you wish to speak?
Thank you,
You may
Mr.
be seated in the
President.
gallery.
And I think you've heard the words of His Eminence, the Cardinal, because he concentrates on life and love. And for anyone that has seen or listened to his homilies, aka sermons for my Protestant counterparts, you'll know that that Cardinal DiNardo stresses life and love and the teachings of Jesus Christ. And so with the audience of Catholics today, I want to welcome everyone to the Advocacy Day, and more important, commend our spiritual leader, the Cardinal, for his efforts, and all of the bishops and the flock that is here today. So thank you for letting me do that, Mr. President.
And senators, and the Cardinal has to be outside. They have a big rally of thousands of people to speak in a few moments. We don't normally greet our pastors of the day, but if anyone would like to come up and greet Cardinal DiNardo, please do so at this time. Dean of the Senate moves to excuse Senator West on account of a death in the family. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. Motion adopted. The Dean of the Senate also moves to dispense with the reading of yesterday's journal. Any objection? Hearing none. Motion adopted. Senator Campbell for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I just want to introduce a great group of school students from St. Paul II. Stand up if you would. They are coming to see their capital. Members, help me give them a warm welcome. Thank you so much for visiting your capital.
Chair lays out the following resolution. Secretary will read the resolution by Birdwell.
Senate Resolution 352 by Birdwell, recognizing March 28, 2023 as City of Waco Day at the state capitol.
I was in your fair town this weekend. Senator, you're recognized.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Members, it's my pleasure to announce that today is Waco Day at the state capitol. Waco, Texas has a rich history. In the 1800s, the economy of Waco profited from the Waco and Northwestern Railroad, the St. Louis and Southwestern Railroad, and the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad. Of course, our beloved Dr. Pepper was created in Waco in 1885, thanks to the great city. At one point during World War II, Waco was the #1 producer of cots, tents, duffel bags, for the United States military during World War II. Waco has many noteworthy places, including the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame, the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, the Waco Mammoth National Monument, Cameron Park Zoo, Baylor University, McLennan Community College, Texas State Technical College, and the Magnolia Silos, all call Waco home, and I'm proud to represent this special city. The Greater Waco Chamber of Commerce, which was established in 1899 as the Waco Business Men's Club, has positively impacted Waco's business and economy, and it's a growing part of the Heart of Texas region of Texas. I'd like to invite several members of the Waco delegation to stand and be recognized as I call your name. Mayor Dylan Meek. Mayor, if you would, please stand. City Council Member Jim Holmes. Councilman, if you would. McLennan County Judge Scott Felton, McLennan County Commissioner Precinct 2 Pat Miller, McLennan County Commissioner Precinct 4 Ben Perry, Midway ISD member Rick Tullis, Matt Metters, the Chamber's CEO, and our special guest Alice Starr. Would you please stand, Alice? Thank you. Members, would you welcome the entire delegation as the entire delegation stands in the southeast corner? Please welcome them to your state capitol. Mr. President, I move adoption.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. Welcome everyone from Waco. Thank you, Senator.
Hooah. Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Hall, you're recognized on the Doctor of the Day.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Ojale is a board-certified family medicine doctor practicing in Fair Park Hospital and is a resident of Rowlett, Texas. In 2004, she graduated from medical school from the University of Lagos in Lagos, Nigeria. She completed her residency at Family and Community Medicine at University of Arizona. At Fairview Park Hospital, Dr. Ojale specializes in the multi-specialty ICU, and her duties include being this sound ambassador, physician mentor for the hospital. In 2021, she earns certifications from the SHM Leadership Academy and Cornell University. She is a member of the American Academy of Family Practice and the Society of Hospital Medicine, which work to promote and maintain high-quality standards for family practice. Senators, please stand and help me welcome Dr. Ojale to the Texas Senate. Thank you for your service.
The chair lays out the following resolution. The secretary read the resolution.
SR 350 by Alvarado et al., recognizing September 23rd, 2023 as fourth trimester care day.
Chair recognizes Senator Alvarado on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, our healthcare system is designed to provide regular prenatal and health checks to women throughout their pregnancy, but not as much attention is given to them after they give birth. The first 3 months following the birth of a baby, known as the fourth trimester, is a time of substantial transformation and adaptation for new moms who are going through significant physical, hormonal, and psychological changes as they navigate motherhood. Yet during this critical time, a new mom typically has only one follow-up visit with their healthcare provider, usually 6 weeks after childbirth. We know the health and well-being of a mother and baby are intimately connected, especially given how crucial the first few years are to a child's development. During the fourth trimester, mothers may suffer from physical and mental health issues that are too far often gone underdiagnosed and untreated, with some mothers reporting problems, breastfeeding, infections, and physical trauma resulting from childbirth. Senate Resolution 350 recognizes September 23, 2023 as fourth trimester care day in an effort to help bring greater attention to the need for maternal health and wellness during this critical time. I want to thank the Texas Physical Therapy Association for helping to bring attention to this important issue. Member, please help me welcome and recognize our guest in the gallery of TPTA Board Member Gail Zitterkoff, the Executive Director of TPTA, Craig Tungust, Kelly Aparicio from Houston, and Christy Hammerly from Austin. I move adoption.
Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The resolution is adopted. Chair recognizes Senator Springer for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe I have Salina up here in the crowd somewhere. There they are. Hey, Senators, please join me in congratulating AKA Mr. Salina, Corbett Howard. Corbett, stand up, please. On his retirement from the city of Salina. Corbett is joined today in the Senate gallery. He was first elected to the Salina City Council in 1999 and was elected mayor in 2002. He served 3 terms as mayor before becoming the executive director of Salina Economic Development Corporation. And in last June, he retired from the city as director of business and government, drawing to close more than 2 decades of public service in the city of Salina. Corbett not only served the city of Salina, but he served our nation as a second lieutenant in the United States Army, Senator Birdwell. He is a decorated Vietnam veteran, earning 16 military decorations, including the Bronze Star, the Air Medal, and the Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Cross. Corbett, thank you for your service to Salina and to Texas and for all you've done. Congratulations on your retirement, Mr. Salina. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Senator Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Springer, for bringing this fantastic resolution. And anyone who knows Corbett knows that he is an incredibly talented and giving man. And I suspect that we're about to see the only thing he's not good at, and that's retiring. I don't think he's going to slip off into the sunset one single bit. Thank you for being here today. We're so proud of you, and I'm so proud to represent Salina with Senator Springer. God bless you in your retirement.
Chair lays out the following resolution. Secretary, read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 356 by Eckhart, commemorating Library Day.
Senator Eckhart, you're recognized.
Thank you so much. Today I'm so honored to recognize the Texas Library Association, who has some of their Central Texas members here today in the gallery. TLA is the largest library association in the country, the largest in the country, representing more than 5,000 librarians from academic, public school, and specialized libraries. This diverse coalition leads the way with a culture of learning and a mission of uniting and amplifying voices of librarians from across our great state. The breadth of library science can be seen in the robust priorities these professionals focus on, such as ensuring Texans have improved access to affordable broadband, something we have a bipartisan zeal for, promoting digital literacy, protecting academic and intellectual freedom, as well as supporting workforce and economic initiatives. Libraries remain essential, operating as the heart of communities across our state. Offering a diverse range of books and other media, libraries give patrons from all walks of life the opportunity to explore different perspectives, to become more empathetic toward other lived experiences, and to celebrate the imagination and creativity within each of us. Thank you so much, TLA, for all you do in advocacy.
Members, the motion's on the adoption of the resolution. Any objection? Hearing none. Resolution adopted. Thank you, Senator. Senator Kolkhorst, you're recognized for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President, members, it is such an honor today to recognize and welcome to the Texas State Capitol, Aransas County. Members, I call it the jewel, the crown jewel in our crown of Texas because it is so beautiful down there. And it was a pleasure to meet with them last night over dinner. I know that we had the two mayors from Rockport and Fulton, county judge, city council men and women. We have chamber board members as well as businessmen and women that have joined us here today. And I just want y'all to help me welcome them. You heard me say Aransas County, Rockport, Fulton, maybe 1,000 times after 2017. And Mr. President, I want to thank you for your travel to Rockport and Fulton and Senate District 18 over and over and over again after Hurricane Harvey. You sat with me, you listened, you heard their concerns. I remember our First Lady of the United States came several times, and so did the Vice President, in us rebuilding that. And members, you were so generous in the tax revenue that you gave to help rebuild parts of Texas, but nothing greater than what you did for Aransas County. And so help me give a warm welcome to Aransas County, Rockport, Fulton, one of the most beautiful places in all of Texas right there. Thank you. Welcome to your Texas State Capitol. When we have time out of session, let's go down there and enjoy it. So they depend heavily on tourism, but they also have other great industries, and so we're very proud to have y'all here today. Thank you for your input last night. God bless you, and God bless Aransas County.
Thank you for being with us, and you've done a tremendous job of rebuilding. So look forward to seeing you after session sometime. Thank you all for being here. Chair lays out the following resolution by Senator Blanco. Secretary, read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 348 by Blanco, recognizing April 2nd, 2023 as Education and Sharing Day.
Senator Blanco, you recognize that we have special guests in the gallery?
We do, Mr. President. Thank you so much, Mr. President and members. I'm pleased to have members from Chabad Lubavitch of Texas join us today for Education and Sharing Day. And I'd love to ask you all to stand up, please. Members, for more than 4 decades, every U.S. president has declared the annual observance of Education and Sharing Day in honor of the anniversary of Rabbi Mendel Schneerson's birth and his contributions to education. As one of the most celebrated figures in the 20th century, Rabbi Schneerson's built the Jewish Chabad Lubavitch movement into a worldwide community, where he established several thousands of Orthodox Jewish schools that stress both academic achievement and character development. Throughout his life, Rabbi Schneerson was a champion for value-based learning, and Education and Sharing Day represents an important opportunity for Texas to reflect not just on how to foster academic achievement, but also to ensure young people live rich and purposeful lives and fulfillment through service and good work. Today, Chabad Lubavitch of El Paso is an anchor in our community, serving as a safe place of worship for our Jewish community, and provides a welcoming place for anyone to celebrate, to learn, and to discover. With that, Mr. President, I'd like to thank the members of Chabad Lubavitch of El Paso for traveling over 500 miles to join us today. Welcome to your Texas Senate. Thank you, Mr. President, members.
Thank you, rabbis, for joining us. Honored to have you with us. Thank you. Senator Menendez, did you want to speak on the resolution?
Yes, Mr. President, I do.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to thank Senator Blanco for Senate Resolution 348 and recognizing today as Education and Sharing Day. It's so good to see my dear friend, Rabbi Haim Block up there and all of the rabbis. We're just so proud of all the good work that you do around the state, and we look forward to working with you. And it's just a great day in Texas so that we can see and celebrate our diverse history, our diverse experience, and how it is through our diversity that we are stronger. So it is wonderful to have you, to welcome you here to your Texas Senate. And Senator Blanco, thank you for having this wonderful resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Menendez. Once again, thank you for joining us. Safe travels back to El Paso. The motion is on the resolution. Any objection? Hearing none. Resolution is adopted. Thank you, Senator. Following message from the Governor and Secretary. Read the message.
To the Senate of the 88th Legislature regular session, I ask the advice, consent, and confirmation of the Senate with respect to the following appointments. To be members of the Governing Board of the Texas Civil Commitment Office, Roberto Robert Dominguez Elsa, Elizabeth C. Christie Jack, Fort Worth. To be members of the Texas State University System Board of Regents, Earl C. Duke Austin Jr., Houston, Russell D. Gordy, Houston, Thomas E. Tom Long, Frisco. Respectfully submitted, Greg Abbott, Governor of Texas, to nominations.
Senator Sparks, you're recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of the Senate Committee on Nominations, action report from our meeting that was held on Monday, March 27th has been placed on your desk. In accordance with Senate rules, this report will be eligible for consideration tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. That concludes the morning call, members. Senator Springer, and Senator, we have some people between you and the mic here, gentlemen. Thank you. You're recognized to spend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 22.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 22. Many Texans across this state don't have the property tax base to be able to make sure that law enforcement is fully funded. I appreciate, as I know many of you have rural parts of your districts, and I thank the President for traveling this state last year on his bus tour and seeing and visiting with our district attorneys, with our sheriffs, and really making sure that we fully understand that no matter where Texans travel, they should be able to feel safe. They should know that they're safe from criminals and that we have the resources as a state. And I appreciate the governor giving me this opportunity and this honor to carry Senate Bill 22 because it helps address those problems. As we heard in testimony, the sheriff from Throckmorton County that Senator Perry represents, that I used to represent when I was in the House, he has 915 square miles. And he is the only law enforcement officer in the entire county. 8,000 people a day are driving through his county, and he is it. If he has a problem on the road with somebody, he knows that DPS is 30 minutes away because they come out of another county to serve him. And that is not the law enforcement we need to see in our state. Additionally, when we look at our rural counties from a prosecutorial standpoint, they face the same challenges of being able to pay lawyers, to be able to go to Smith County outside of Tyler, or in Montague County that I represent, knowing that they can supplement pay, be able to hire additional investigators to go out and look for these. And so, members, what Senate Bill 22 does is it gives an allocation to counties below 300,000 to subsidize and to be able to hire additional sheriff's deputies, to have a minimum salary of $45,000 for those road deputies, $40,000 for those deputy jailers, and $75,000 for a sheriff. And we give $500,000 for the big counties, down to $250,000 for those counties below 10,000. And for our DAs and prosecutors, we're doing the same type of situation. We have money that we are allocating to them, $100,000 for those small counties, up to $250,000 for the large. And with that, this will make sure that Texans, no matter where they are, where they travel, are safe. And we will have the proper law enforcement and the proper prosecutorial power to go after those bad actors. And with that, Mr. President, thank you again for giving me this honor to carry this bill. And with that, I move suspension of the Senate's regular order of business.
Any objection? Hearing none. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 22. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 22, relating to the establishment of grant programs to provide financial assistance to qualified sheriff's offices and prosecutors' offices in rural counties.
You're recognized on a motion to engrossment.
I move passage of Senate Bill 22 to engrossment.
Any objection? Hearing none. The bill passed to engrossment. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be heard on 3 several days.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
30 ayes and no nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out in third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 22. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 22, relating to the establishment of grant programs to provide financial assistance to qualified sheriff's offices and prosecutors' offices in rural counties.
Senator Springer, thank you for carrying this bill. As you said, when I traveled across the state last fall, in county after county after county after county, I met these sheriffs who are doing work on behalf of their citizens with very few deputies. The pay is not sufficient to hire more, not having enough of the right equipment. And in your layout, you said that clearly. This is unprecedented. The state has never helped local counties with law enforcement before in the jails. So I thank all the members, all who supported this unanimously and recognize law enforcement needs to be there in all 254 counties. Thank you for doing this. You're recognized on final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I do appreciate your leadership on this, and also all the members who have supported, especially Senator Huffman and Senator Perry, who have helped me so much with this bill in the interim, and as we have led into it, it is an absolute honor, and with that, I move final passage of Senate Bill 22.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
Being 30 ayes and no nays, a great day for rural law enforcement. Thank you, Senator.
Senator Parker is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1089.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 1089 relating to repealing the ability to declare certain unopposed candidates for office as elected. Members, Senate Bill 1089 seeks to uphold the principles of transparency, fairness, and inclusivity in the electoral process by repealing the ability to declare unopposed candidates for office as elected in Texas and clarifying the order in which offices are listed on the ballot. Elections are a crucial mechanism for ensuring the legitimacy of the people's representatives, and allowing uncontested candidates to remain on the ballot upholds the democratic principles of transparency and inclusivity. Excluding uncontested candidates from the ballot can be seen as a violation of these democratic principles and may erode trust and confidence in the electoral process. Additionally, having uncontested candidates on the ballot sends a message to the public that the electoral process is open and transparent, which is essential in fostering trust and confidence in the system. By repealing the ability to declare unopposed candidates for office as elected in Texas, Senate Bill 1089 ensures that voters have the opportunity to exercise their right to vote and have their say in the electoral process, even in the absence of competition. Moreover, clarifying the order in which offices are listed on the ballot ensures that voters can easily locate the candidates they wish to vote for. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Hinojosa, for what purpose do you rise?
Well, Senator yields, Senator Parker yield for a couple of questions.
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield, Mr. President.
He yields.
Thank you, Senator Parker. And I guess my only question is, the usual practice is when a candidate does not have an opponent, for whatever reason, is that opponent or that nominee or candidate is declared a winner without having to hold an election. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's what we're really repealing, so that the name has to be on the ballot here going forward. And that's the way it's always been in our history until this last cycle.
Okay, and I guess, are there concerns about the additional cost that would be incurred by a local governmental entity, a city or a county or a school district?
I don't believe there are any additional costs or concerns. They're running an election already. It's, in this case, it's a general election, and so you're going to have your name will be there as the person that may be unopposed. But no, there's no additional cost. They're already running an election, so that's a sunk cost.
Have there been instances where, let's say, 3 candidates are running for city council in a small rural community, and nobody files against those 3 candidates? So if they don't have opponents, you mean they still have to be on the ballot in the primary or the general election, even though they don't have any opponents?
Their name would be on the ballot so that their voters can vote for them, and the citizens know that it's not an automatic, that they have to actually receive votes to be elected. And so that's the way it's always been throughout all of our history in Texas. So there's nothing different, except this last cycle that we just experienced was unique.
Well, tell me about that, because I was not aware, and I thank you for at least maybe teaching me a little bit of history. So this process itself of declaring a candidate a winner, if there was no opposition, is something that's happening recent?
Yes, Senator, that's correct. And so it was an item that was in Senate Bill 1 from the previous legislative session. And it was something that we're now perfecting here. It's something that needed to be addressed, that just could have been cleaned up that time, but we're doing it now.
So you're representing to us and that the history has been that in the past, even though there was no opposition to a candidate, the candidate would still be listed in the ballot.
The name was always listed on the ballot, and so that, again, you're restoring, I think, confidence and trust that the voters know that there's no such thing as an automatic, that individual, Senator Hinojosa, you've got to receive a vote in order to be elected, right?
So I guess it would also allow for potential write-in candidates, correct?
Well, the structure is the same as it's always been, so we're not affecting that in any way.
Thank you, Senator Parker, for your explanation.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Senator Parker moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1089. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended.
Mr. President, I move passage to engrossment.
Almost there. The chair lays that on second reading. Senate Bill 1089. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1089, relating to repealing the ability to declare certain unopposed candidates for office as elected.
Senator Parker is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Parker moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Parker is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the 3-day rule.
Senator Parker moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Will the secretary call the roll?
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez.
There being 29 ayes and 1 nay, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1089. Will the secretary read the caption?
Senate Bill 1089, relating to repealing the ability to declare certain unopposed candidates for office as elected.
Senator Parker is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Senator Parker moves final passage of Senate Bill 1089. Will the secretary call the roll?
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 29 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Whitmire is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1151.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business, take up and consider Senate Bill 1151. Senate Bill 1151 would require that before a defendant is released on bond, they must provide a minimum 10% of the bond set in their case. In addressing the crime wave in Harris County the past year, our delegation discovered that many bondsmen were not charging the traditional 10% bond that has historically been the threshold for requiring someone to post bond in their case. The issue gained attention in Harris County recently, where even capital murder suspects with past convictions were released from jail after posting a minimal percentage fee. In some instances, bond companies were collecting as little as 2%, actually with a payment plan. They would release an armed robber after that person posted 2% and then finance the remainder of the bond, which you and I realize turns them loose to go rob and steal to pay the remainder of their bond fee. After hearing from local officials and crime victims, the Harris County Bail Bond Board approved a new rule requiring that the minimum be no less than 10%. This bill seeks to make that rule a statewide standard to better safeguard all of our communities. The committee took stakeholders' concerns into account and added language that ensures that the bill applies to all types of bondsmen, whether they're property or surety bondsmen, or even insurance companies that often operate these types of businesses. Clarifies that individuals representing a corporation can take receipt of the payment rather than just the corporation. There was misinformation on this bill by some that would say it applies to all counties, but the Code of Criminal Procedure clearly states in Article 1.02 that all of the procedures in this code shall govern all criminal proceedings. Remember, I know your offices have been flooded with emails from bail bondsmen. However, I do think this legislation will not hurt their business, and I do believe it's in the best interest of public safety in Texas. As I've said repeatedly, criminal justice is a system. If any element of it is broken, the entire system suffers. This is an instance where we've got to improve the bail bond system to see that repeat violent offenders are held accountable and that we use the standards that have historically been the requirement for posting bond, a 10% charge. Mr. President, I move passage of Senate Bill 1151.
Senator Hinojosa, for what purpose?
Actually, I move for suspension. I'm getting a little ahead of myself.
Oh, yes, sir. Senator Hinojosa, for what purpose do you rise?
Was Senator Whitmire yield for a question?
Sure.
Gentleman yields.
And I know, Senator Whitmire, we're making a lot of state law based on some of the issues and problems that exist in Harris County. But in this type of situation, as I was listening to your explanation, and of course came out of our committee, your committee, Criminal Justice,
yes,
and I voted for it. In many instances, I know in the Valley, you have someone not being able to put up the whole 10% up front. Are they allowed to have a payment plan?
You know, Senator Huffman's doing a great job on bail bond reform, and she has language that you use the least required bond to see that that person does return to court, a true risk assessment. But what we've discovered is that the low percent payment and the financing of that is increasing the crime wave in Houston, Harris County. It's, as you probably know, it's always been 10%. It was understood by the stakeholders, the judge, the magistrates, the defense. Let me tell you who's really suffering from this practice in Harris County are the crime victims. We heard them in our committee, which you serve on. So the crime victims expect people to be held accountable, and then they find out they didn't have to pay 10% to return to their home in comfort. As little as 2%, and then the crime victims have to face them in the courtroom, and it's just not holding people accountable. And what really happens is the magistrates and everyone assumes when they set the bond that you're going to have to come up with the 10%. No one assumed, or we didn't even realize that something as small as 2% were allowing people to return to the streets of Houston, Harris County. And I think it's a great standard for the state of Texas.
And I don't disagree with you, because I heard that same testimony you did. I guess my question is, and I understand the bail bond fees of 2%, 1%, 3% that really allowed people out on bond. They shouldn't be, because they couldn't pay the 10%. My question focuses more on requiring the 10%, but that means I got to come up with 10% up front. Can I do a payment plan?
That's up to the magistrate to set that amount. I mean, obviously, Senator Huffman and all of us are trying to have some true risk assessment where you can look at not just that particular charge that's before that magistrate that day, but did that individual, the defendant, have a repeat record of violent offenses? And to take a capital murder, the worst of the worst charge, and allow that person to be returned to the streets by only paying the 10%, but the 2% fee, it's just unconscionable. And none of the stakeholders even knew that was taking place. And particularly severe public safety is the financing of that bond. Just take 2% from an armed robber, repeat armed robber, someone that's murdered someone, take 2% and say, go back to your business of robbing and stealing to finance the rest of your bond. You know, there's no wonder that we have 1,900 people in Harris County waiting to go to court for murder or capital murder, and half of them are on the streets out on bond, for some bonds as low as 2%. And that's what I'm trying to correct.
And you know, Senator Whitmire, I was joint author of the reform bill that we passed, I think, last session. Also, a joint author of the SJR, and I agree with the what's going on and is being abused. I was trying to figure out and pinpoint and focus and target the issue of whether or not require the 10%, but in many cases they couldn't come up with the 10% up front, whether or not they could finance that amount of money. Otherwise, they could probably go to a finance company, or the family go to a finance company and borrow the full amount they need to pay up the bond. I mean, that's an issue that I was concerned about, and I think your answer is they cannot, a bail bond person cannot finance the 10%. Is that correct?
I would love to, and I think in future legislation, we ought to try to get inside their operation. You know, they're a quasi-government agency. They're carrying out a government function of posting someone's bond. I think it would be very interesting to be able to have an open records request on this industry to see what the actual charge is. You know, everyone's presumed innocent. You use a bond to guarantee someone's going to report in court. But, Senator, they're not even revoking the original bond that someone sets. They set a 2% bond. They violate the conditions of the bond. They go back to the magistrate and get another bond. That's unheard of, too, to get repeat bonds as you continue to get the next offense charge. And I'm sure it's surprising to you that you would take a murderer before a magistrate that's already owned one bond and then give him or her the 2% bond to be released again. Quite frankly, I don't think they should have been released on bond, but as we've learned, the Constitution requires it. Senator Huffman's addressing that, and I just think this is an element of the criminal justice system that has to be corrected.
I think we're focusing on the reforms that we passed on the bail reform bill, and one more question. The other issue, how do we enforce to make sure that the bail bond person is charging the full 10%?
How do we enforce it?
Yes.
Well, we have local bail bond authorities that can be familiar with the law, and they will pull someone's bail bond license.
Do they report that to the...
No, they're going to do it locally. Locally, not license the bail bond company.
Okay.
We actually, it's actually working much, much better in local Harris County than it was a year ago before we came up with our local rules. But the problem is, Senator, the people charged, the defendants, they don't recognize the county line. So, you know, they can be charged in Travis County, they go to Williamson County, and they have a different set of rules and amounts. And so we're trying to have the historic standard that's been recognized across the state for many years.
I supported the bill in committee. I'm going to vote for it. I think there's still some issues along the way that we'll be able to come back and address again, see how it really works in actual practice. But thank you, Senator.
I'll be glad to work with you.
Senator Bettencourt, for what purpose do you rise?
Ask questions of the author.
Does
Yes, sir.
the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
He yields.
Dean, you mentioned the crisis in Harris County, and I think the exact numbers are 1,875 people that have been charged with crime that are effectively out. And of those, I think at least 900 are obviously already involved in another problem in the justice system. And I think 600 of these people are actual technically fugitives from justice.
You're absolutely correct. And that shows the necessity of having a meaningful bail bond system. But you're right, Senator Bettencourt, we have 600 individuals charged with murder or capital murder that are loose on the streets of Houston, Harris County. Authorities don't even know where they are.
Right.
And I'm afraid, and I know they're the ones you see on the evening news that are committing repeat violent offenses. Armed robbers do not just commit one robbery and stop. That is their profession, and the guns are their tools. So this will at least let everyone know involved in the criminal justice system know that if they're apprehended, it's a 10% bond. and then the judge and the magistrate can adjust the amount knowing that 10% is going to be required.
Right, because, Senator Whitmire, the problem is it's a factor of 10. I mean, it's really a big number change because a 1% bond is almost de minimis, okay? A 10% bond actually registers that there's actually an economic penalty here. But for the 600 fugitives of justice, I'm not sure what penalty would get their attention because they're highly likely to commit another aggravated, assault with a deadly weapon or another even capital murder.
Well, let me tell you how bad it is. If there are warrants for those individuals, arrest. Those that are charged with capital murder know the consequences of going back to court are either going to be life. If they're found guilty, it'll be life without parole or capital murder. They're the most dangerous because when law enforcement approaches them to apprehend them, they know they're going to be held accountable and they're very dangerous.
Right, and that's AKA fugitives from justice. So thank you for your bill, Dean. It will make Harris County safer, and Lord knows we need that.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, I move suspension if there's not any other questions.
Senator Whitmire moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute Senate Bill 1151. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on the second reading committee substitute Senate Bill 1151. Will the secretary read the caption?
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1151 relating to the authority of corporations to act as sureties on bail bonds.
Yeah.
Senator Huffman, for what purpose do you rise?
To speak on the bill? Is it the right time? Or ask questions?
It is. Senator, you can speak now or on final passage. You're certainly recognized now. It's up to you.
I'll go ahead now if that's okay, if that's acceptable.
You're
I just wanted to commend Senator Whitmire on this bill. It's an important piece of legislation that I think is an important piece of the reforms that we have been trying to implement for a couple of sessions on how to ensure that our streets are safer and that those who are our most violent offenders in our communities are held to protect the citizen. And as Senator Whitmire put it, those that can be allowed out with the least restrictive means should be able to do so. I would agree with Senator Whitmire that for many years we all thought that the 10% rule was still in effect. I think a lot of us were caught by surprise that in fact it was not. So this simply puts into statute what we all thought was the law and was happening, but in fact was not, and that is a 10% minimum for the bond is required. It's my understanding from what we heard in committee and from Senator Whitmire's committee substitute that this does include all entities that issue bonds, and that's my understanding. If I could have permission to question the author as well.
Does the gentleman yield for questions? Do you yield for questions?
Yes, that is the language of the bill, that all entities are covered that are issuing bonds.
Okay, and that was done through your committee substitute, and I believe you did work with some of the bonding companies to achieve that result.
We worked with them, not for them, with them.
Yeah. Do you believe that your legislation will help with all the legislation that we're all trying to pass that makes reforms the way we issue bail, who receives bail, and how it's administered?
What it will correct is the practice of violating what has always been the understood number of 10%. It's what the magistrates historically has used as the measure, the DAs, the judges, the crime victims. Everyone thought if a violent person is going before a magistrate, the bond is set at amount with the understanding that he or she would have to deposit, or the bondsman would deposit, the 10% of the larger amount of the set bond. Much to our shock, in Harris and in Houston, as little as 2%, sometimes 1% was being taken. And of course, we also have learned the practice of allowing them to finance the remainder, which only increases crime because those defendants, it was shown, would go out and rob and steal again to pay their bond.
Right.
And the sad news, Eve, when they violated another law, they got the same deal. No revocation of the first bond. So we really, as you have addressed in your legislation, and I'm attempting to, we have a broken bail bond system in Harris County. And the main issue should be one of risk assessment. If someone has shown you repeatedly that they're a violent offender, they should get at least a requirement of depositing 10% before they're out on bond.
Absolutely, and I agree with you, Senator Whitmire. That's why I'm going to support your legislation. Thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you, Mr. President, members.
Senator Whitmire is recognized to move passage to engrossment.
Yes, Mr. President, I move passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 1151 to engrossment.
Senator Whitmire moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Whitmire is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I so move.
Senator Whitmire moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Will the secretary call the roll?
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckert.
There being 27 ayes and 3 nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays that on third reading and final passage. Committee substitute to Senate Bill 1151. Will the secretary read the caption?
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1151, relating to the authority of corporations to act as sureties on bail bonds.
Senator Whitmire is recognized for a motion.
President, I move final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 1151.
Senator Whitmire moves final passage, committee substitute, Senate Bill 1151. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez.
There being 27 ayes and 3 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Whitmire. Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion to suspend the Senate's regular order business on Senate Joint Resolution 58.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order business, take up and consider SJR 58. Members, let me begin by reminding you that this bill is an exact refile of the bill that passed off this body's floor last Senate session in 21, 30-1. The events of the past few years brought to light a number of structural inadequacies related to our state's statutorily prescribed disaster and emergency response structure. Members, let me say this as plainly as I can. This legislation is a reaction to shortcomings in our laws in the respective chapters as written and amended since 1975. By all accounts and by my own analysis, Governor Abbott acted clearly within the letter of the law. And further, the governor demonstrated a sincere desire to protect his fellow Texans while coordinating a well-organized response to a largely unprecedented disaster and unfamiliar operating environment. And I certainly appreciate his leadership during that trying time. With the chief executive is elected, just like the legislative branch is elective, and I believe it is imperative that the legislature assert itself as the most sovereign will of the consent of the governed. To that end, we must no longer allow a 19-month legislative interim to be leveraged against the legislature, particularly during an emergency and disasters that affect a significant number of Texans. The most glaring problem with our state's disaster and emergency laws could be stilled to this. The floor and ceiling are one of the same when it comes to executive authorities invoked by a disaster or an emergency declaration. SJR 58 seeks to realign the legislative and executive purviews during disasters and emergencies, and this legislation strikes a balance of affording the governor to oversee a unilateral and mostly unencumbered response to most disasters and emergencies, while affording the legislature an opportunity to weigh in on disasters and emergencies that impact a substantial number of Texans. SJR 58 requires the governor to call a special session if a disaster or an emergency declaration is to exceed 30 days, or in the case of a radiological or nuclear event, 90 days, and will cross any one of 3 well-defined thresholds: half of the state's population, 2/5 of the state's counties, or 102 or more of the state's counties, or 2/3 of the counties in 3 or more of the trauma service regions. During that special session, the legislature would be able to respond to a disaster and emergency declaration in the manner that it deems best. And SJR 58 also creates a very limited cause of action available only to a sitting member of the legislature to directly file suit at the Texas Supreme Court, which shall have original jurisdiction. Members, the legislature is the sovereign embodiment of the people, and it cannot, nor should it, delegate this representative duty at any time, much less during a time of disaster that substantially impacts the overwhelming number of citizens of the state of Texas. With that, Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Birdwell moves suspension of the regular order business on SJR 58. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading SJR 58. Will the secretary read the caption?
SJR 58, proposing a constitutional amendment regarding the powers of the governor, the legislature, and the Supreme Court following certain disaster or emergency declarations.
Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion.
Move passage to engrossment, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves passes to engrossment, SJR 58. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Joint Resolution 58. Will the Secretary read the caption?
SJR 58, proposing a constitutional amendment regarding the powers of the governor, the legislature, and the Supreme Court following certain disaster or emergency declarations.
Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion.
Move final passage, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves final passage of SJR 58. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the resolution is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Birdwell.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1104.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business, take up and consider Senate Bill 1104. Members, this is the enabling language to the SJR that we just passed. Members, again, let me remind you that this bill is an exact refile of the bill that passed off the Senate floor 30-1 last session. The Texas Disaster Act is nearly 50 years old, and its language is almost entirely taken from a piece of model legislation that was designed for a full-time legislature and a cabinet-appointed executive branch. It's little wonder that our disaster laws fit so awkwardly in the midst of the balance of power as outlined in the Texas Constitution. After all, ours is a part-time legislature and a full-time executive and judicial branch. Further, issues arise when attempting to distinguish between a disaster and an emergency in statute. And although Chapter 418 of the Government Code speaks to disasters and 433 of the same code specifically with emergencies, the two terms are used interchangeably and they've become functionally synonymous. Senate Bill 1104 codifies the call for session as specified in Joint Resolution 58, and these thresholds are designed to trigger a special session if ever a significant number of Texans are affected by disaster and recovery efforts. However, these thresholds are set high enough to ensure that the Texas legislature does not become a de facto full-time legislative body. SB 1104 provides a meaningful distinction between disasters and emergencies, and it also ensures that localized emergency declarations under Chapter 433, like an incident in East Texas, does not change or apply to the liberties of people in West Texas. Additionally, SB 1104 stipulates that only the legislature may impair the operation or occupancy of a class of business during an emergency or a disaster. The legislation leaves nearly all of the governor's suspension powers intact, with the exception that the governor may not suspend the Disaster Act or the Emergency Act or a provision related to any chapter of the Sunset Code and an agency of this state. Members, I believe that the checks and balances offered by this legislation fortifies the constitutional principles needed to preserve our state in the years to come, and I ask for your same favorable consideration you gave this legislation last session. I move suspension, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1104. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1104. Will the Secretary read the caption?
Senate Bill 1104, relating to the authority of the legislature, governor, and certain political subdivisions with respect to disasters and emergencies.
Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion.
Move passage to engrossment, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Will the secretary call the roll?
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1104. Will the secretary read the caption?
Senate Bill 1104, relating to the authority of the legislature, governor, and certain political subdivisions with respect to disasters and emergencies.
Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion.
Move final passage, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves final passage of Senate Bill 1104. Will the secretary call the roll?
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Birdwell.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Zaffarini is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 65.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 665 relating to excluding an academic transcript from the definition of information service for purposes of sales and use taxes. Members, this bill would exempt students at private higher education institutions, like their counterparts at public institutions, from paying the sales tax for an academic transcript. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Zaffarini moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 65. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 65. Will the secretary read the caption?
Senate Bill 65, relating to excluding the furnishing of an academic transcript from the definition of information service for purposes of sales and use taxes.
Senator Zaffarini is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Zaffarini moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Zaffarini is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. So moved.
Senator Zaffarini moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Will the secretary call the roll?
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 65. Will the secretary read the caption?
Senate Bill 65, relating to excluding the furnishing of an academic transcript from the definition of information service for purposes of sales and use taxes.
Senator Zaffarini is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Senator Zaffarini moves final passage of Senate Bill 65. Will the secretary call the roll?
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Zaffarini.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Hughes, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 921. Suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 921.
Thank you, Mr. President. Remember, Senate Bill 921 is a bill we passed on second reading yesterday. It deals with this concept of ranked choice voting. Some states and cities have experimented with this and had an unpleasant experience. And so Senate Bill 921 will make it clear that in Texas, we do not do ranked choice voting. We passed it on second reading yesterday. Today is on third, and I move suspension of the Senate's regular order of business.
Secretary will call the roll when ready.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
21 ayes, 9 nays. The rule is suspended. Chernell lays out on third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 921. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 921, relating to the determination of a majority vote in certain elections.
You recognize on final.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move final passage.
Secretary will call the roll when ready.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
21 ayes, 9 nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
We'll give you a twin spin here, as they used to say on the radio. Senator Eckhart, for what purpose?
I rose to speak on the third reading.
I did not see your light. I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
So I would like to speak on the bill.
It's now passed. I'm sorry. If you would like to submit a statement for the Journal to be printed, you could do that.
Of course, that is available to me.
You could do that. You could do that. I looked down. Did you hit the button late?
I did.
Okay.
And you have,
we got to get, not your fault. We have a lot of people hit the button just as we're going to a motion, and I don't see it, so I'm sorry.
You have recognized others outside of time.
I have not. After a bill is passed, I've not recognized anyone to my knowledge after the bill is passed. You may submit something to the Journal. I'm not trying to be difficult, Senator. I didn't see your light. You acknowledge you pushed the button at the last moment.
I did not acknowledge I pushed the button at the last moment. I acknowledged that I had pushed the button.
Senator, the bill is passed. You may submit something to the Journal. I thought you said you pushed the button late. I'm sorry. Thank you. Senator Hughes, you recognize Senate Bill 493, suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 493. Senators, this has to do with veterans and benefits to which they're entitled. Over the past 3 years, everyone's been dealing with the effects of COVID-19, the vaccine, the appropriate response, and of course the effects have been felt across the world and have affected each one of us in different ways. Our armed forces in particular, we're thinking about with this bill, an estimated 8,000 veterans have received a less than honorable discharge for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine. A veteran's military discharge remains on one's record permanently and could affect ability to find civilian employment, and certainly has a bearing on veterans' benefits offered by the state and the federal government. Veterans shouldn't be burdened with the fear of being less than honorably discharged for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, I know we have veterans on this floor and certainly veterans watching who've served, and vaccines are a normal and routine part of the military life. I think most folks would have to agree the COVID-19 vaccine is a different type of vaccine, and many people had concerns about it. It's a deeply personal decision. So this bill says for those veterans who received a less than honorable discharge from the armed forces, if they can prove to the Texas Veterans Commission that their refusal to receive the COVID-19 vaccine was the sole reason for their less than honorable discharge, they would then be entitled to Texas veterans benefits they would receive were their discharge not less than honorable, if that makes sense. So we can't go back and change what the U.S. Armed Services have done, but for purposes of Texas benefits, if a veteran can show that they were discharged with a less than honorable discharge solely because of their refusal to take the vaccine, that veteran will then be entitled to full Texas benefits available to other similarly situated veterans. I want to be clear, this does not require the Veterans Commission to go back and research every case, but the veteran must show that was the sole reason for their less than honorable discharge. It doesn't have any effect on the benefits available. It just says whatever is available would go to that veteran as well. That's what the bill does, and I move suspension.
Senator Hinojosa, for what purpose?
Senator Hughes, yield for a
Senator
question.
Hughes, will you yield?
Of course I'll yield.
Senator Hughes, I guess you're focusing solely on the issue of refusing to get vaccinated.
In particular, the COVID-19 vaccine. Yes, sir, that's right.
Here's my concern. And as you well know, I served in the United States Marine Corps, Vietnam, and I got so many shots and vaccinations when I was inducted into the Marine Corps. And I volunteered for the Marine Corps. There are more vaccines when I was leaving from California to Vietnam, and then more vaccinations in Okinawa, and then when in Vietnam, and then come back. So why are we selecting this particular vaccine as one that a soldier can refuse?
No, thank you, Senator. It's a legitimate question. As I've heard from you and other veterans that's part of the process, taking vaccines. I think anyone, whether they love or hate the COVID-19 vaccine, would acknowledge it's a different type of vaccine. It takes a different approach than a traditional vaccine, right? Which, of course, gives your body a dose to build up an immunity. The COVID-19 vaccines are different. That the approach they take is completely different from any vaccine we've seen before. And so many people, you and I know a lot of folks who had concerns about that, especially younger people, especially maybe females who are still considering childbearing. For various reasons, a lot of people had special concerns about the COVID-19 vaccine. So that's all this bill's about.
Well, we're not, for example, maybe inquiring in more detail. So if someone, if for whatever reason, wanted to get out of the military and avoid his or her military obligations that they signed up under oath, and then use this as an excuse to get out of serving our armed forces. You're not concerned about that?
No, Senator, that's a great point. So this would only take effect after someone had been discharged. So that's a great point. This does not give anyone a reason to get out. But after they've been discharged, if they can come back and prove that the only reason they were less than honorably discharged was because they wouldn't take the shot, then this bill would come into play. So I'm glad you asked that. This does not give a reason for a discharge. This doesn't give a new reason to discharge someone from the military.
Well, how do you prove that?
The burden is on the veteran to prove that. And so we're not asking the Veterans Commission to go back and open up the cases. Any veteran wanting to claim benefits under this statute, if it passes, will have to go to Veterans Commission and prove. And if they can't prove it, then they won't receive any benefits. So the burden is on that veteran who refused the vaccine and was then less than honorably discharged.
You know, I guess I'm kind of skeptical, for lack of a better word, that we're now sitting a precedent where whatever vaccine becomes very politicized for whatever reason, all of a sudden we're given an out to a lot of military personnel based on saying, well, you know, this is not a proven vaccine, or this disagreement, or become a political issue. They can use it to avoid their military service and still get veteran benefits.
Well, Senator, they'd only be entitled to benefits if they were in service for the requisite amount of time. The Veterans Commission told us that it does require 6 months active duty service. So if someone gets out before then, if they get out of the military because of the vaccine and they haven't been in long enough to qualify for benefits, this bill would not give them any help at all. You're right about that.
I think we're setting a bad precedent, quite frankly, Senator Hughes, by doing this and allowing veterans to use, in this instance, COVID vaccines. There was a very politicized process, and those decisions are to be made by doctors, not us politicians or public officials. And so I'm very much concerned. I support veterans 100%, but this is making an exception that I'm not sure that I would agree with it. Because it's setting a bad precedent, and that in the future we can use that again as an excuse. Well, now we're going to allow veterans who, for whatever reason, refuse to take this particular vaccine, for whatever reason they come up with, or it becomes a controversial issue in the political arena, if you will, and boom, they can get out I don't think it's good for our military. I don't think it's good public policy, and I think it really sets a bad precedent. But thank you, Senator Hughes.
Senator, thank you. And I know I speak for everybody that no one is ever going to question your commitment to our veterans. That's not the issue here. Of course, we agree on that. And I understand what you're saying. This is a different kind of vaccine. We believe it's appropriate to treat it differently. But I hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hughes.
Senator Hughes moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 493. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 493. The Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 493 relating to qualifications for certain individuals for veterans' benefits.
Senator Hughes is recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Hughes moves passage to engrossment. Is there an objection? Hearing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Hughes is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Mr. President, that's my motion.
Senator Hughes moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson.
It would be 28 yeas and 2 nays. The rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 493. The Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 493 relating to qualifications for certain individuals for veterans' benefits.
Senator Hughes is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage, Senate Bill 493.
Senator Hughes moves final passage of Senate Bill 493. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores,
It would be
Gutierrez.
28 yeas and 2 nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Betancourt is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 221.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. The committee substituted Senate Bill 221 is a bill that was passed in 2017. It was based on testimony where there was multiple instances of the Texas Supreme Court having to step in and reprimand certain cities regarding their inability to draft ballot language and follow established procedures in concerning ballot petitions. The city of Houston was reprimanded 3 times by the Texas Supreme Court over their inability to draft ballot language and proper procedures. And in addition, we've had several cities that have had issues that have gone all the way to the Supreme Court and have been overturned, like the city of Houston language was. The testimony given around the state was San Marcos, where the city actually sued petition organizers, San Antonio, Sugar Land, where they declined to count petition signatures because petitions didn't follow the city charter, even though it was filed under the local government code. Bastrop, where the city split the petition charter change into 5 items, even though the charter change addressed only 1. And Richmond, where the city refused to even count the petitions at all. Of course, there was the recent Texas Supreme Court ruling, which Supreme Court ordered the city to change, this is the city of Austin, to change deceitful language. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 221 is the end result of these guidelines. It's written to help establish a clear set of guidelines, easily followed by all parties, and it would set a statute or standard of language used on the ballots, provide an easier public interaction in providing ballot language, and then allowing more citizen participation during the petition drive. We're creating a non-judicial avenue for citizens to use before going to judicial challenges. And this is really the important part of this bill. And I'm going to take two really good amendments from Senator Menendez on this because these issues need to be resolved quickly and, if necessary, sent to a rocket docket for a conclusion. And with that, I move suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute Senate Bill 221.
Senator Hinojosa, for what purpose?
Will Senator Betancourt yield for a couple of questions?
Senator Betancourt, will you yield?
We will.
And Senator Betancourt, you and I have had some discussions on this bill, and I know that I'll wait till you get your...
Right. Wait till I get my answer.
Talking points. And I voted for this bill, a similar bill that you carried session for last. But there seems to be a change in some of the language that I'm going to ask you about. Why was that? And I will say that I think, quite frankly, ballot language is extremely important because you can state a referendum in many ways that you get people to vote against or for, depending on how it's worded, and not meet the real true purpose of a petition on the statute itself or the city ordinance. Here's what I would ask. You know, as I read through your bill, there's a provision there on page 1. There'll be a line 145. This subsection does not prohibit a religious organization from circulating or submitting a petition in connection with a recall election. And as you well know, above that, you prohibit unions and governmental, government or corporations from getting involved or at least paying and financing this type of petitions. Could you just explain that and clarify that, please?
Senator Hinojosa, I have your answer because the code from 2011 that prohibits corporations and unions has been there. And this is based on a case in El Paso to recall the mayor in 2011. This section of code was that had a rule that churches couldn't circulate a recall petition. That's why it's there, to make it clear they can. So it's from a 2011 recall election in El Paso. That's why it was there in 2017 when we all voted for it then, and that's why it's still in the bill now.
But it would not prohibit nonprofits or community groups from organizing and raising money to be able to support or oppose a petition.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess that's pretty much what I was asking clarification, because I want to make sure that the prohibition against corporations and unions has been there for quite some time, as I understand it. But this is not a new change in the statute. It's pretty much based on a decision out of the Paso Court of Appeals.
Well, all I know is that what I've got right here is that it was based upon a case in El Paso to recall the mayor in 2011. And this section of the code was to rule that churches couldn't circulate a recall petition. That's why it's there, to allow them to do it. But it would apply to community, nonprofit groups, anything. That's clearly the author's intent.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Senator Menendez, for what purpose?
The gentleman yield for some questions.
Will the senator yield?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senator Betancourt, I received some calls about the concerns were with the timing and the definition, and one of the concerns was that if the, let's say, the election order were to come in, too close to the election date, and the Secretary of State's office wouldn't review the language quickly enough, we could also start to interfere with the MOVE Act, the Military and Overseas Voter Act. And so that's the basis of the amendments that I brought forward. One, to make sure the Secretary of State's office would review it in a timely manner. And then two, that we wouldn't do anything that would put us at odds with anyone that's overseas or in our military families that has a right to vote.
And you're 2 for 2 with your concerns. I'd be happy to accept both as friendly amendments.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Betancourt moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 221. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, all.
There'll be 22 yeas and 8 nays. The rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 221. The secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 221 relating to requirements for certain petitions requesting an election and ballot propositions.
Following amendment, secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Menendez.
Senator Menendez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is simple, an amendment that would ensure that all the propositions would be reviewed in a timely fashion by the Secretary of State's office within 7 days. This would be a step towards curing any concerns by election administrators who are looking for clarity on proposed timelines, especially when they've got early voting and they've got the Military and Overseas Act that they have to comply with. And as we heard from the layout, members, this amendment is acceptable to the author. So I move adoption.
Senator Betancourt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a great amendment, makes the bill better. I accept as a friendly amendment.
Senator Menendez moves adoption of the amendment. Is there objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Following an amendment, Secretary read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 2 by Menendez.
Senator Menendez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment would simply ensure that every provision passed in this bill would in no shape or way interfere with the Military and Veteran Overseas Act. This act protects the rights of our service members and their family members to vote who are not in the country but have the right to vote. And as we've spoken and you've heard us in the question and answer, this amendment is also acceptable to the author. So I move adoption.
Senator Betancourt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Another good amendment. And I think this is important, that especially for San Antonio and all military voters, wherever they are. So, no, this amendment is acceptable to the author.
Senator Menendez moves adoption of the amendment. Is there objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Betancourt is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the committee substitute Senate Bill 221 be passed to engrossment.
Senator Betancourt moves passage to engrossment. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There will be 22 yeas and 8 nays. The bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Betancourt is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Mr. President, I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 several days.
So we're going to hold there? Senator Betancourt, we're going to hold there.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the sentiment, Mr. President.
You're welcome.
Let me see if I can go round up some friends.
Thank you.
Senator Betancourt, you found some friends. You're recognized on the suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 several days.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
24 ayes, 6 nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 221. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 221 relating to requirements for certain petitions requesting.
Senator Betancourt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the members. This is how to make a bill better, but through bipartisan action. I move final passage of the committee substitute to Senate Bill 221.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
22 ayes and 8 nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Teamwork.
And teamwork. Thank you, Senator Menendez, and my new friends and old friends, Senator Hinojosa. Okay.
Senator King, could you come up and do this for a moment?
Senator Hancock, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1308.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the regular order of business and take up and consider Senate Bill 1308 at this time relating to the operation of an unmanned aircraft over the airport or military installation, creating a criminal offense. Senate Bill 1308 creates an offense for the operation of an unmanned aircraft in a way that interferes with the military installations and airport operations. Currently, Texas has no grounds to engage in prosecution of these types of threats. By creating a misdemeanor offense in Senate Bill 1308, we will allow law enforcement to pursue operators who are intentionally interfering with these operations through the use of unmanned aircraft. With that, I move suspension.
Senator Hancock moves suspension on the regular order of business on SB 1308. Is there any objection? Hearing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1308. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1308 relating to operation of an unmanned aircraft over an airport or military installation.
Chair recognizes Senator Hancock.
It's the other thing, Mr. President. It's the other piece of wood that you gavel on.
Yes, I just noticed I did that. Thank you. I noticed it sounded kind of funny at the time, so.
I did too.
I'm just glad I moved his cell phone before I
I'm glad you moved his cell phone. I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Hancock moves passage to engrossment on Senate Bill 1308. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment.
Better.
Senator Hancock is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Senator Hancock moves suspension of 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, King.
Being 30 ayes and no nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage SB 1308. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1308, relating to the operation of an unmanned aircraft over an airport or military installation.
Senator Hancock is recognized for a motion.
Move final passage.
Senator Hancock moves final passage on SB 1308. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
Being 30 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is finally passed.
Thank you.
Who did?
Senator Zaffarini is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on SB 63.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 63 relating to an instruction guide for family members and caregivers of veterans who have mental health disorders. Members, this bill simply would require the Health and Human Services Commission and the Texas Veterans Commission to publish on their websites an instruction guide for family members and caregivers of veterans who have mental health disorders. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Zaffarini moves suspension of the regular order of business on SB 63. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading SB 63. Secretary will read the caption.
SB 63, relating to an instruction guide for family members and caregivers of veterans who have mental health disorders.
Senator Zaffarini is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Zaffarini moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Zaffarini is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. So moved.
Senator Zaffarini moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 30 ayes and no noes, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage SB 63. The secretary will read the caption.
SB 63, relating to an instruction guide for family members and caregivers of veterans who have mental health disorders.
Senator Zaffarini is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Senator Zaffarini moves final passage of SB 63. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the bill is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Members, I just wanted to take a moment with your attention to welcome and introduce the former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Ben Carson, also noted surgeon. It's great to have you here. Thank you. Thank you. You may come up and greet him if you wish. You don't get a chance to meet a brain surgeon every day. Maybe he can help all of you at some level. Members, if we can return and get back to work here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Members, we will continue. Thank you, Dr. Carson, for spending time with us.
Senator Bettencourt is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business. On SB 460, is that a 4? 467.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the other president holding the cheat sheet back there, are you sure you're ready to drive?
I'm told this is preliminary hazing.
Oh, okay, that's right. Level 1 hazing, followed by level 2. Well, thank you, Mr. President. So a House-trained person driving the Senate? Oh, this is going to be fun today. Since the fall of 2021, organized criminal groups have learned how to disrupt fuel dispensers with pulsars at gas pumps throughout Texas. The pulsar control communicates between the gas pump and the terminal, which regulates the fuel flow at the pump. Criminals are breaking into gas pumps and damaging the pulsar to gain unlimited access to fuel, causing substantial financial loss. Typically, suspects will disrupt the pulsar, and other suspects pump the stolen fuel into large auxiliary tanks. The pulsar itself costs a few $100s to replace or repair. Therefore, police officers who have caught suspects damaging it are only able to charge them with misdemeanor criminal theft. However, Senate Bill 467 would amend the criminal mischief statute to clearly provide that damage to or destruction of a retail motor fuel pump is a third-degree felony. By increasing the penalty for damaging or destroying a motor fuel pump, law enforcement and prosecutors will have another tool to deter and reduce fuel theft. And members, this is just another move by organized crime from ATM machines now into these pulsar disruptors, which apparently cost $5,000 and can be paid off on their first theft. So with that, Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 467.
Senator Hancock, for what purpose?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Parliamentary inquiry.
Proceed.
I'm wondering, is Senate Bill 467 in the regular order of business?
No.
You tell me why we're taking up 467 then?
Because there was because the chair recognized Senator Bettencourt's motion to suspend the regular order of business.
But we haven't suspended the regular order of business yet.
Well, that's because he has moved and you pushed your button before I had a chance to
But
see if there was objection to that.
It is you that chose to take this one out of the regular order of business. Is there a
That
reason
I did.
you
I
chose
did
this?
exercise my authority as chair.
But the Senate does.
Limited as it is.
Well, I understand that you may be confused with your time in the House, but we actually have rules over here as well regarding the order of business. Are you aware of the Senate rules?
I am.
Or just the House rules?
I know the House rules much better than I know the Senate rules.
Obviously, based on this. So you just randomly went out of the order of business because you prefer Senator Bettencourt?
Obviously. But it's putting my bill at risk.
They're not called on.
You're not recognized for that at this time.
That's right.
So you do admit that your understanding of the House rules is much better than your understanding of the Senate?
I'm not sure that's a proper parliamentary inquiry.
Oh, parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Senator.
Is your understanding of the House rules much greater than your understanding of the Senate rules?
There is no question about that. That is correct.
Okay. But you do understand we do have an order of business and we do have rules in the Senate.
That is my understanding.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hancock. Senator LaMantia, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. President. To ask a question of the author.
Does the author yield for questions?
I yield to what is like a substantial amount of freshman activity on a bill.
Senator, you are recognized for questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Bettencourt, thank you for bringing this bill. And as we discussed earlier, I just wanted to clear up the legislative intent of the bill to clarify whether or not this would apply in the case of someone filling up their car at the fuel pump and then driving away with the pump still in their car on accident.
Is this like a freshman test or?
No, sir. This comes from experience.
Oh, from experience? That's right. Well, then I guess it is a test, a freshman test. Senator Morgan, just to personalize this, I know Senator LaMantia, I just was trying to, right, he's already, I try to personalize this because these are freshmen asking questions, Senator Creighton. Okay, if you drive off and leave the fuel pump in the car, no, you're not subject to third-degree felony.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Bettencourt has moved to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider SB 467 at this time. Is there any objection? Hearing none. Secretary shall read the caption.
Senate Bill 467 relating to increasing the criminal penalty for the offense of criminal mischief involving impairment of a motor fuel pump.
That's waiting for.
No.
Let me check that out there.
But the problem is the print is too small to read from a distance.
Where is Senator Zaffarini? Never mind.
Okay, we're on second reading way out. Okay. For what? Senator Bettencourt is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. This education is going well, Senator Hancock. Mr. President, I move passage of Senate Bill 467 to engrossment.
Senator Bettencourt raises a motion. Is there any objection? Hearing none. Motion is approved. Senator Bettencourt, you're recognized for the next motion.
Parliamentary inquiry. We're not doing anything to mess the bill up too badly, are we?
I will say I was caught off guard.
Oh, that's right. So, well, let the education continue. Mr. President, I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 several days.
Senator Bettencourt has moved to suspend the rule that the bill be read on 3 several days. Is there any objection? Oh. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa.
Being 30 ayes and no nays, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage SB 467. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 467 relating to increasing the criminal penalty for the offense of criminal mischief involving impairment of a motor fuel pump.
Senator Bettencourt is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last person that hit the wrong one broke it. check with Senator Creighton. I move final passage of Senate Bill 467.
Senator Betancourt moved for final passage. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, and
Being 30 ayes and 0 nays, SB 467, thank you, Mr. President, is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Despite the chair.
Members, and Mr. President, you should check with the real Mr. President, because he might have been the last person that hit the wrong wooden mallet. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a new version of hazing, a freshman senator. He did very well. And trust me, if we don't have this sheet up here for all of us, we're all in trouble, Senator King, so. So members, we now have 4 people who have hit this by mistake. Senator Huffman, with her famous comment, Brandon Creighton, who smashed it to smithereens. And while you weren't paying attention last week, I did it. And now we have a freshman who did it. So you're in a very, thin air, high class, few people, elite class. Did we ever send you the bill for breaking this, by the way, Senator Creighton? Okay, we will. You were a good sport, Senator. Senator King, for what purpose?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Will that substitute for a bill hazing?
Not on your life.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. That's a parliamentarian answer, by the way. It's very official. It's in the Roberts Rules of something. Thank you. For those of you in the gallery who are students, when we have a freshman senator, they are hazed, very nice hazing, a little fun, either here at the podium or when they have a bill up. So Senator King is a freshman senator, and so we had a little fun. I just noticed your shoes. I'm sorry about that, Senator Springer.
Tonight, North Texas is in the Final Four of the NIT.
Then that's very appropriate.
So that's why I'm.
There you go.
Hopefully Thursday we're in the finals. We'll play Wisconsin tonight.
Fantastic. Great school. So I guess the senators all agreed to make an exception to the rule of wearing sneakers on the floor. I'm just checking. Yeah. Senator Colcourse, you're recognized on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1080.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business and take up and consider at this time committee substitute to Senate Bill 1080. Members, Senate Bill 1080 is a bill that impacts Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District, which impacts Lee County and Bastrop County, to provide clear authority to establish a mitigation program for well owners who have been impacted by a loss in water pressure. This bill gives explicit authority to establish a mitigation program by Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District. While Chapter 36 gives broad authority, this bill is intended to address a unique situation by Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District. Unlike many other GCDs, Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District faces more litigation, in part due to the wealth of deep water in the aquifer and their proximity to major growth centers around our state. Senate Bill 1080 creates no new fees. This language is actually restating much of what is in Chapter 36, but to clarify, to give that groundwater conservation district the ability to help the local owners. So with that, Mr. President, I will have a clarifying amendment, but Mr. President, I do move to suspend the regular order of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, we'll suspend it. Chair lays out on second reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1080. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1080 relating to a mitigation program and fees for the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District.
There is an amendment, and I'll let it get to the back row before you explain it. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Kolkhorst.
Senator Kolkhorst, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, during the committee hearing, we heard from the Lower Colorado River Authority with some of their concerns, and working with them, we're adding a little bit of language between rule and may, which is adopted in accordance with Section 36.101 of the Water Code, again, restating it. So with that, of course, I represent part of the LCRA, enjoy working with them, and I'm glad we could do this amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. You're recognized passage on engrossment.
So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, bill passed on engrossment. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I so moved again.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell,
30 ayes, no nays, rules suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1080. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1080 relating to mitigation program and fees for the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District.
You're recognized on final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of committee substitute of Senate Bill 1080.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
30 ayes, no nays. Your bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Middleton, you're recognized on committee substitute for Senate Bill 15 to suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move suspension of the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute for Senate Bill 15. Senate Bill 15 and the committee substitute that I'm laying out here today is about one very simple thing, and that is fairness. And it's fairness for something that generations of women before us and everyone here today have fought so hard for, and that is the opportunity to compete. And unfortunately, that opportunity to fairly compete in college sports for biological women is in jeopardy, and those Title IX protections are in jeopardy. The World Athletics Council has recently admitted this practice is unfair towards women and banned biological men from competing in women's sports in order to prioritize that fairness and integrity needs to be in athletic competitions for women. And this bill helps ensure that. It helps ensure that those hard-earned victories, athletic records, those spots on teams, scholarships, the name, image, likeness, sponsorships that we passed in this chamber and the House last session are protected in our Texas public institutions of higher education. And all this does is make sure that female athletes have the integrity of their sport protected, and that the biological sex opposite of their sex, in other words, biological men, are not allowed to unfairly compete against them. It also protects our female athletes from retaliation from an institute of higher education or by an intercollegiate athletic team for reporting or whistleblowing on a violation of this act. We know that biological men are physiologically different than women. We are watching the denial right now, of one of the most basic truths out there, which is a refusal to acknowledge the biological difference between men and women. There's a lot of evidence on this. The British Journal of Sports Medicine has shown that even with up to 36 months of testosterone suppression, biological men, so this is trans women, still have a 9% advantage in speed. And members, when this was in State Affairs, we heard in the committee from a transgender athlete that supports this bill, Senate Bill 15, saying that their testosterone levels sometimes are at 0%, so registers nothing. But they said they still have a natural and a physiological advantage over biological women. And when we consider those physiological differences between men and women in the context of athletic competitions, we can't have fair competition in the state of Texas. And that takes away opportunity for our women athletes in this great state. And I want to read to you something that Jerry Shantou said. She is a 3-time Division I NCAA champion. She's a decorated and accomplished female athlete. And she said this. She said, "I'm a scared mother to a 9-year-old daughter. If we continue to diminish the protections of sex-segregated sports, I will have to look at my daughter in the eye and tell her that no matter how hard she works, no matter how hard she tries, a male body with its biological advantages will beat you, and it is within the rules to do so." Jerry also spoke of the psychological and emotional turmoil that women are suffering because of this particular issue. You know, and Teddy Roosevelt said, very famously, it's a quote that I know a lot of us have in our office, a lot of us have read, about the man in the arena. Well, what about the woman in the arena? That's why we're here today. We hope every woman in this great state has a fair opportunity at athletic excellence through achievement, and this bill protects that opportunity. I have a small daughter, Martha Ann. She's going to be 2 here in June. And for her sake, if she wants to be an elite level collegiate athlete, I hope she has that fairness. I hope she has that opportunity. But if we don't pass this, I'm afraid that she will not in this state. And as a legislature, we have taken the first steps toward protecting fair competition. We passed the Protect Girls Sports bill last session. Senator Perry, Representative Swanson, HB 25, which protects K through 12 and makes sure that biological boys are not unfairly competing against biological girls. Well, now it's time to take the second step and finish the equation here to make sure we're ensuring fairness for all girl and women athletes in this state, not just K through 12, but on every level, because students, they should have to compete on athletic teams based on their God-given biological sex. And members, at the end of the day, you cannot have fair competition when women are forced to compete against biological men. And with that, Mr. President, I move suspension of the Senate's regular order of business.
Senator Johnson, what purpose?
Questions for the author on the bill?
Do you yield?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Middleton, you and I have discussed this over the past few days. It's a difficult issue. You mentioned the World Athletic, I'm sorry, what is the World Athletic?
World Athletic Committee.
And they recently...
Council, sorry, I apologize.
And they recently resolved what exactly with respect to transgender sports participation?
It's a very recent decision. So prior to this week, the World Athletics Council allowed biological men to compete on women's sports based on testosterone levels. And there's a long history behind that there, but they put it out to their members. So they asked them if they thought this was fair and if they thought that policy was the right thing. And they said they heard resoundingly from their members that it was not fair and that was not the right thing. So they have banned biological men from competing against biological women in women's sports.
Was it more nuanced than that? Did they, I think they're, and correct me, I may be wrong here, I think what they ruled was that if a male has experienced male puberty and then transition, they may not participate as a woman in female sports. Is that precisely what they ruled?
That's correct, yes. And they said that they reserved the opportunity to revisit it and all the other things that they put in there that the lawyers, I'm sure, asked them to draft.
And I'm sure there was more. And I think the World Federation of Swimming came up with a similar policy, largely in response to some things that we saw at the NCAA level last year. So we're certainly seeing world sports organizations, national sports organizations, moving towards the position that, in fact, you're advocating for us to do at the state level. But I would ask you, if in the year 2024, the NCAA does as they have said they will do, address this policy themselves, shouldn't we postpone this vote and see what happens at the NCAA level, given that heretofore in just about every respect, in the context of college sports, this legislature defers to the NCAA, our universities defer to the NCAA, and I'm feeling like it's a bit of a bigger move of government than we need right now when the trend is to go ahead and do what you're saying to do through the institutions that are more properly charged with regulating this space.
Well, we should not defer it because the time for fairness is right now. I'm also not convinced that the NCAA is going to do anything about this. The Biden administration, with their Department of Education, submitted public comment, a proposed rule to allow, of course, biological men to compete against biological women, and the NCAA didn't even submit public comment on that. They have in fact implied that their rules are really guidelines, and their constitution of the NCAA speaks to that. So the NCAA's constitution, which of course is a step above the rule, says that they will respect state laws and abide by state laws, and they expect their members to do so. So I'm not convinced that they're actually going to do anything on this particular subject.
I can appreciate the concern for myself, perhaps others, and I've spoken with universities. They do intend to defer to NCAA policy on this, and personally, I would rather cast a vote in 2 years when we've seen what the NCAA does. So, appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The motion is on suspension. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
19 ayes, 9 nays, and 2 non-voting. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 15.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 15 relating to requiring public institution of higher education students who compete in intercollegiate athletic competitions to compete based on biological sex.
You're recognized on passage to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move passage to engrossment of committee substitute to Senate Bill 15.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bedcourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Urquhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa.
19 ayes, 8 nays, 3 not voting. The bill is passed to engrossment. I'm going to pause here a moment, Senator. Since we had 3 non-votes, we're checking on the votes needed to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule. Members, we will stop there, and that bill will be taken up tomorrow. Senator Eckhart, for what purpose? Okay. Senator Eckhart will wait tomorrow to speak on third reading. Thank you, Senator Middleton. Senator Perry, are you ready? On Senate Bill 162, to suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, current rule of the Texas Department of State Health Services requires that birth certificates include sex if known. The sex listed on the minor's birth certificate in Texas can be changed with a court order. Senate Bill 162 requires that birth certificates list the biological sex of the newborn. If there is determined by a physician that the child was born intersex, the sex does not have to be listed at that time. Senate Bill 162 prohibits the sex listed on a birth certificate of a minor from being amended unless the change is to correct a clerical error or complete the birth certificate if the sex was not listed at the time of birth or if the child is intersex and the sex is later determined. With that, I move to suspend the regular order of business.
Any objection? There is. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
19 ayes and 11 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out in second reading Senate Bill 162. The Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 162, relating to the required inclusion of a person's sex on a birth certificate and prohibited change of sex on birth certificate of certain minors.
You're recognized on passage to engrossment.
Move passage to engrossment.
Any objection? There are. Secretary will call the roll when ready.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
19 ayes and 11 nays. Bill passed to engrossment. We'll hold there until tomorrow.
Thanks, sir.
Members, the President's desk is clear. Are there any announcements? Following motion in writing.
Motion in writing. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent for Senate Bill 1469 relating to requiring certain information before being employed by a child care facility to be withdrawn from the Committee on Education and re-referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services. Motion by Senator Betancourt, the author. Senator Creighton, Chair Committee from which bill is being withdrawn. Senator Colcourse, Chair Committee to which bill is being re-referred.
Is there objection or a motion? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. Senator Swertner for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, the Senate Committee on Business and Commerce will reconvene 15 minutes upon adjournment in E1.012. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Colcourse for an announcement. There's a motion. There's a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to suspend the posting rules to add Senate Bill 1469 by Senator Betancourt that was just referred to the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. The committee meeting will be tomorrow in this chamber at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow, March 29th, 2023.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. Senator Creighton for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the 24-hour posting rule so that the Senate Committee on Education can meet upon adjournment today, March 28th, in the Senate Press Room 2E9 to refer bills to the Subcommittee on Higher Education and to consider pending business. Thank you, Mr. President and members. No questions. I move suspension.
Any objection? Hearing none. Members, I know I have a meeting with the Democrat caucus. I'll do that as soon as we adjourn and after and we will not be long, so you can make your committee meetings. I'm just waiting for the dean to adjourn us for the day. The dean is recognized. The chair recognizes the dean of the Center for Highly Privileged Motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Criminal justice will meet at, be safe, 2:45.
You can do 2:45. It's your call.
2:45, members. Criminal justice in the annex where we recessed this morning.
Any objection, members? Now you can make the motion.
Thank you. I move that the Senate adjourn until 11 a.m. Wednesday, March 29th.
Any objection? Hearing none. The Senate stands adjourned until 11 a.m. Wednesday, March 29th. Thank you, members.